What happens when arrogance meets talent, when prejudice collides with dreams, and when a simple car becomes the turning point of destiny? Meet Marcus Johnson, a gifted mechanic whose innovative designs are dismissed by his wealthy employer's daughter, Catherine Henderson. When she mocks an elderly man's vintage car at a royal garage, little does she know that this moment will change everything. A tale of pride, prejudice, passion, and redemption unfolds in the world of luxury automobiles. Dear friend, if you are watching my story video for the first time, I humbly request you subscribe this channel and press the bell icon to witness this heartwarming journey that will make you question your own preconceptions about talent and social barriers. The gentle hum of fluorescent lights mixed with the metallic symphony of tools against engines in Henderson's luxury auto garage. Marcus Johnson's skilled hands moved with practiced precision over the gleaming engine of a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, his dark fingers tracing the intricate pathways of wires and tubes with an artist's touch. At 37, he had spent more than half his life learning the language of engines, and now they spoke to him in ways few others could understand. "Talk to me, beautiful," he whispered, leaning closer to listen to the subtle irregularity in the engine's idle. His colleagues often joked about his habit of speaking to cars, but Marcus knew every vehicle had its own personality, its own story to tell. The garage was Thomas Henderson's pride and joy, serving Atlanta's elite for over 3 decades. The polished concrete floors and state-of-the-art equipment reflected the premium service they provided, but it was Marcus's innovative touch that had begun drawing in a new generation of luxury car enthusiasts. "Mr. Johnson," called out Jimmy, one of the younger mechanics, "you've got to see this." He held up a tablet showing the latest designs from a European auto show. Marcus wiped his hands on a clean rag and walked over, his eyes lighting up at the cutting-edge modifications displayed on the screen. "Now that's interesting," Marcus mused, his mind already racing with possibilities. "But see how they've approached the aerodynamics. We could improve on that." He pulled out his worn leather notebook, filled with sketches and calculations, and began rapidly drawing his vision. The sound of heels clicking against concrete interrupted his flow. Catherine Henderson's presence always seemed to drop the temperature in the garage by several degrees. The owner's daughter, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that seemed immune to the garage's grime, regarded the gathering mechanics with barely concealed disdain. "Don't we pay you to fix cars rather than draw pictures?" she asked, her voice sharp as broken glass. Marcus straightened up, maintaining his professional composure. "Just working on some improvements for Mr. Whitman's custom order, Ms. Henderson. He specifically requested. My father may tolerate your little design experiments, but let's be clear, this is a repair shop, not a design studio." She glanced at his notebook with the same expression one might reserve for something unpleasant found on the bottom of a shoe. Before Marcus could respond, the rumble of an approaching vehicle drew everyone's attention. A classic 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3 rolled into the garage, its silver paint dulled by years of neglect but its lines still regal and proud. Behind the wheel sat an elderly gentleman in a worn tweed jacket. "Now this," Marcus breathed, "this is automotive royalty." Catherine rolled her eyes. "It's just an old car that needs fixing. Don't get poetic about it." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and contempt. Marcus approached the Rolls-Royce, greeting its owner with genuine warmth. The elderly man, who introduced himself simply as George, spoke about the car with such love that Marcus knew this wasn't just another repair job, it was a restoration of history. As he began his initial assessment, Marcus's trained eye caught subtle details that made his heart race, custom modifications that weren't in any manual, touches that spoke of a heritage far more significant than its current condition suggested. He opened his notebook again, this time sketching ideas for respectful improvements that would honor the car's original design while bringing it into the modern era. "She's got royal blood, this one," Marcus murmured, running his hand along the elegant bodywork. "And we're going to help her remember who she is." The day continued with its usual rhythm of repairs and maintenance, but Marcus's mind kept returning to the Rolls-Royce. During his lunch break, while others headed to the break room, he sat in his small workspace, surrounded by technical manuals and his own designs, refining his vision for the classic car's restoration. Thomas Henderson stopped by late in the afternoon, his weathered face breaking into a smile at the sight of Marcus's detailed sketches. "You've got a gift," "Son," he said, studying the drawings. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Marcus nodded gratefully, knowing that his boss's support was genuine but increasingly rare in the face of Catherine's growing influence over the garage's operations. He had heard the whispers, seen the shifting glances. But like the engines he loved, Marcus knew that persistence and precision would eventually overcome resistance. As the day drew to a close, Marcus stayed behind, as he often did, working on his designs by the light of his desk lamp. The Rolls-Royce sat in silent dignity nearby, its presence inspiring him to push his ideas further. In the quiet of the empty garage, he could almost hear the stories it could tell, stories of nobility, of history, of excellence hiding behind a weathered exterior. He didn't know it then, but that old Rolls-Royce would become more than just another restoration project. It would become the bridge between his present and his future, between who he was and who he was meant to be. But for now, he was simply Marcus Johnson, the mechanic who dared to dream of being something more. Catherine Henderson's Louboutin heels echoed through the marble-floored hallway of her penthouse apartment as she prepared for another day of managing her social obligations and, increasingly, her father's business interests. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a life carefully curated to project success and sophistication. At 31, Catherine had already established herself as a force in Atlanta's social scene. Her blonde hair was never out of place, her wardrobe was exclusively designer, and her circle of friends consisted solely of people who mattered, or at least, people who she believed mattered. "Clara," she called out to her assistant, who appeared instantly with a tablet in hand. "What's the status on Daddy's garage?" "Revenue is up 15% from last year," Clara reported, swiping through charts and graphs. "The new high-end clientele seems to appreciate the custom work that Marcus." "That mechanic," Catherine interrupted, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her coffee cup. "He needs to remember his place. We fix cars, we don't reinvent them." Clara hesitated before continuing. "Mr. Johnson's modifications have actually brought in several high-profile clients. The waiting list for his custom work is 3 months long." Catherine's expression hardened. She moved to her window, looking out over the Atlanta skyline she considered her birthright. The garage had been her father's life's work, built from nothing into the most prestigious auto repair service in the city. But in Catherine's vision, it could be so much more, a luxury brand, a status symbol, not some playground for a mechanic's wild ideas. The memory of yesterday's encounter with Marcus and that old Rolls-Royce surfaced in her mind. The way he looked at that car, with such reverence and understanding, irritated her in ways she couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was the fact that he seemed so content, so sure of his place in the world, despite being so far from the circles she considered important. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father, "Coming to the garage today. Need to discuss the new expansion plans." Thomas Henderson had always been Catherine's hero. She remembered spending weekends at the garage as a child, watching him transform it from a simple repair shop into an institution. But lately, she worried he was losing his edge, becoming too comfortable with letting employees like Marcus overstep their boundaries. "Have my car brought around," she instructed Clara. "And pull up everything we have on Marcus Johnson's employment history. Every certification, every reference, every detail." The drive to Henderson's luxury auto gave Catherine time to reflect on her position. She had worked hard to establish herself as more than just the owner's daughter. Her business degree from Emory and her natural talent for networking had helped modernize many aspects of the garage's operations. Yet somehow, this mechanic with his notebook full of drawings commanded more respect from the staff than she did. Arriving at the garage, Catherine noticed a small crowd gathered around the Rolls-Royce from yesterday. Marcus was explaining something to her father and several mechanics, his hands moving animatedly as he pointed out various features of the car. The look of admiration on her father's face made something twist in Catherine's stomach. "Daddy," she called out, her voice carrying across the garage floor. The group dispersed quickly, mechanics returning to their tasks with practiced efficiency. Only Marcus remained, closing his ever-present notebook with deliberate care. Thomas Henderson embraced his daughter warmly. "Princess, perfect timing. Marcus here has some fascinating ideas for the Rolls-Royce restoration. The owner has given us carte blanche to Actually, Daddy, we need to discuss something important. She shot Marcus a pointed look. In private. In Thomas's office, Catherine laid out her concerns. She spoke of professionalism, of maintaining standards, of knowing one's place in the hierarchy of things. She watched her father's face carefully as she suggested that perhaps it was time for some changes in staffing. Catherine, Thomas began, his voice carrying the weight of years of experience, Marcus is one of our most valuable. He's a mechanic, Daddy. A good one, maybe, but still just a mechanic. His designs, his modifications, they're not what Henderson's is about. We need to protect our brand. The conversation continued, Catherine pressing her point with all the skill she'd learned in boardrooms and charity galas. She spoke of expansion plans, of franchising opportunities, of taking Henderson's to the next level. And with each word, she saw her father's resistance weakening. Later that afternoon, Catherine stood in her office, watching through the window as Marcus worked on the Rolls-Royce. She had to admit, there was something almost artistic in the way he approached his work. But art wasn't what built empires, and Catherine Henderson was determined to build an empire. Her phone buzzed again. Clara had sent over Marcus's employment file. As she began to read, a plan formed in her mind. Sometimes, she reasoned, you had to break things down to build them up properly. And Marcus Johnson, with his dreams and his designs, was definitely something that needed breaking down. The sun was setting over Atlanta, casting long shadows through the garage windows, as Catherine finalized her strategy. She didn't notice the subtle smirk that played across the elderly Rolls-Royce owner's face as he watched her from across the garage, nor could she have guessed how her carefully laid plans would eventually crumble in the face of a truth she wasn't yet ready to see. The morning Marcus Johnson was called into Thomas Henderson's office started like any other. He had arrived early, as usual, his leather notebook tucked under his arm, ready to begin work on the Rolls-Royce restoration. The garage was quiet, the tools still sleeping in their organized spaces, waiting for the day to begin. Thomas Henderson sat behind his desk, looking older than Marcus had ever seen him. Catherine stood by the window, her back turned to them both, but her reflection in the glass revealed a subtle smile that made Marcus's stomach tighten. "Son," Thomas began, his voice carrying an unfamiliar weight, "we need to talk about your position here at Henderson's." Marcus sat perfectly still, his calloused hands resting on his notebook. He had known this day might come, had seen it approaching in Catherine's triumphant glances and whispered conversations with her father. "The garage is moving in a new direction," Thomas continued, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. "We're streamlining our operations, focusing on our core services. Standard repairs, maintenance, nothing experimental." Catherine turned from the window then, her designer suit as immaculate as ever. "Your work has been appreciated," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But Henderson's needs to maintain its reputation as a premium service provider, not an automotive playground." Marcus felt a surge of anger but kept his voice steady. "Mr. Henderson, the custom work has brought in new clients. The waiting list." "The waiting list is precisely the problem," Catherine interrupted. "Our regular clients shouldn't have to wait while you tinker with your personal projects. This is a business, Mr. Johnson, not a design studio." Thomas raised a hand, silencing them both. "You'll receive 3 months severance pay, and of course, we'll provide excellent references." He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer, sliding it across the polished surface. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I truly am." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. Instead, he opened his notebook and carefully removed several pages of designs, innovations he'd been developing for the garage's future projects. "These belong to Henderson's," he said quietly, placing them on the desk. "The sketches for George's Rolls-Royce are in there too. Someone else will need to finish the restoration." Catherine's smile faltered slightly at the mention of the Rolls-Royce. "I'm sure we'll manage just fine." Marcus stood, his dignity intact despite the hammer blow to his dreams. He looked at Thomas Henderson, the man who had given him his first real chance 15 years ago. "Thank you for everything, sir. I learned a lot here." As he turned to leave, Catherine's voice followed him. "You're a talented mechanic, Mr. Johnson. Perhaps this will help you remember where you belong. Marcus paused at the door, his hand on the knob. Without turning around, he spoke softly but clearly. You know, Ms. Henderson, the greatest designs in automotive history came from people who forgot where they belonged. The garage was beginning to fill with other mechanics as Marcus cleared out his workspace. Word spread quickly, and his colleagues approached one by one, offering quiet words of support and hastily scribbled phone numbers. Jimmy, the young mechanic who had shown him the tablet just days ago, looked close to tears. "It's not right, Mr. Johnson," Jimmy whispered. "Your designs are the best thing that ever happened to this place." Marcus managed to smile. "Sometimes the best roads aren't the ones we plan to take, Jimmy. Keep learning, keep growing." As he packed his tools, each one a familiar friend, worn smooth by years of use, Marcus caught sight of the Rolls-Royce. George, its elderly owner, stood beside it, watching the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry I won't be able to finish your restoration, sir," Marcus said, approaching the car one last time. George's weathered face crinkled in a mysterious smile. "Don't be sorry, my boy. Sometimes the end of one journey is merely the beginning of a greater one." Marcus took one final look around the garage that had been his home for so many years. The familiar smells of oil and leather, the symphony of engines and tools, the play of light on chrome and steel, all of it etched into his memory like the designs in his notebook. As he walked out into the bright Atlanta morning, his toolbox in one hand and his notebook in the other, Marcus felt something unexpected: freedom. Catherine Henderson had meant to clip his wings, but somehow, she had instead removed his chains. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Your designs deserve to soar. Call me. G." The Royal Motors Automotive Design Studio stood like a cathedral of chrome and glass on the outskirts of Atlanta, its modernist architecture a statement of innovation and possibility. Marcus Johnson stood in the vast lobby, his heart pounding as he read the message on his phone once again: "Ask for Sir George Canterbury at reception." G. The elderly man from Henderson's, the owner of the Rolls-Royce, was Sir George Canterbury, legendary automotive designer and founder of Royal Motors. The revelation hit Marcus like a thunderbolt, and suddenly all the subtle details of their previous encounters fell into place. "Mr. Johnson." The receptionist's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Sir Canterbury will see you now." The elevator ride to the top floor gave Marcus time to process the whirlwind of the past week. After leaving Henderson's, he had spent days sketching new designs, refining old ones, refusing to let Catherine's words define his future. Now, standing in the heart of one of the world's most prestigious automotive design studios, he felt both terrified and exhilarated. Sir George's office was a stark contrast to Thomas Henderson's traditional space. Modern art depicting various aspects of automotive design adorned the walls, and a massive drafting table dominated one corner, covered in sketches and blueprints. "Ah, Marcus." Sir George rose from behind his desk, still wearing his characteristic tweed jacket. "I trust you've had time to think about my proposal." Marcus nodded, pulling out his notebook. "I have, sir. And I've been working on some new concepts." "Before you show me those," Sir George interrupted, "let me show you something." He pressed a button, and a hidden door in the wall slid open. "Welcome to my private collection." The hidden garage took Marcus's breath away. Dozens of classic cars, each one a masterpiece of design and engineering, stood in perfectly maintained glory. But it was the car in the center that made Marcus's heart skip a beat, a 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3, identical to the one at Henderson's, but in pristine condition. "You have two of them," Marcus whispered. Sir George smiled. "The one you saw at Henderson's was a test, one I'm afraid young Miss Henderson failed rather spectacularly. But you, my boy, you saw beyond the surface. You saw the soul of the machine." Over the next few hours, Sir George and Marcus talked designs, innovations, and possibilities. The older man shared stories of his own journey from mechanic to designer, of the barriers he had faced and overcome. With each passing minute, Marcus felt his confidence growing, his creative spirit soaring. "I'm offering you a position as lead designer in our custom division," Sir George finally said. "But more than that, I'm offering you the chance to revolutionize the industry. Your designs, Marcus, they're not just modifications, they're evolution. The opportunity was beyond anything Marcus had ever dreamed of, but he hesitated. Sir, why me? There must be hundreds of designers with better credentials. Sir George's eyes twinkled. Credentials don't design cars, Marcus. Passion does. Vision does. And you have both in abundance. The next few months passed in a blur of creativity and learning. Marcus absorbed everything he could about advanced design techniques, material science, and aerodynamics. His natural talent, combined with his years of hands-on experience, allowed him to bridge the gap between theoretical design and practical application in ways that amazed his colleagues. His first major project was a complete redesign of a luxury sports car, incorporating elements he had first sketched in his notebook at Henderson's. The project team, initially skeptical of the new designer with the unconventional background, quickly became his strongest supporters as they saw his ideas take shape. Late one evening, as Marcus worked alone in his new office, a space filled with light and equipped with the latest design technology, he received an unexpected visit from Jimmy, his former colleague from Henderson's. Mr. Johnson, Jimmy said, his eyes wide as he took in the prestigious surroundings. The garage hasn't been the same since you left. Ms. Henderson, she's trying to modernize everything, but it's all surface, no soul. Marcus smiled, remembering his own journey. How would you like to learn about real automotive design, Jimmy? Under Marcus's mentorship, Jimmy began spending his evenings at Royal Motors, learning the principles of design that had once seemed so far out of reach. It was during one of these sessions that Marcus received the news that would change everything. His design had been selected for Royal Motors' new flagship model. The car was everything Marcus had ever dreamed of creating, innovative yet timeless, powerful yet elegant. As he stood before the full-scale model, Sir George placed a hand on his shoulder. You've done more than design a car, Marcus. You've proven that talent knows no boundaries, that passion transcends prejudice. The older man paused, his expression thoughtful. The industry awards ceremony is in 3 months. I've nominated your design in several categories. Marcus nodded, his mind already racing with improvements and refinements. He thought of Catherine Henderson and her dismissive words, but found that they no longer held any power over him. He had found his true path, his true purpose. The design studio buzzed with energy as news of the nomination spread. Marcus's team celebrated with champagne and heartfelt congratulations, but he slipped away early, heading to his office. There, in the quiet of the evening, he opened his old leather notebook and began to sketch something new, a design that would tell his story in chrome and steel, a testament to the power of never forgetting your dreams. On his desk, next to his state-of-the-art computer, sat a framed photograph of that first Rolls-Royce at Henderson's, a reminder of where his journey had truly begun, and how far he had come. Catherine Henderson's silver Mercedes purred to a stop outside Royal Motors' imposing glass facade. Her latest acquisition, a limited edition luxury SUV, had been performing flawlessly, but she had higher aspirations. The vehicle needed to be more than perfect, it needed to be unique. Ms. Henderson, the receptionist, greeted her with practiced warmth. Welcome to Royal Motors Design Studio. We've been expecting you. The lobby was everything Henderson's garage wasn't, sleek, modern, almost ethereal in its dedication to automotive aesthetics. Display cases housed scale models of revolutionary designs, each one a testament to Royal Motors' reputation for innovation. I understand you're interested in our custom design program, a young associate said, approaching with a tablet in hand. Our lead designer has been briefed on your requirements. He'll be meeting with you personally. Catherine allowed herself a small smile. She had heard rumors about Royal Motors' mysterious new design genius, whose work was revolutionizing the industry. Perhaps this visit would provide networking opportunities beyond mere car modifications. The elevator ride to the design floor gave Catherine time to adjust her designer blazer and mentally prepare her pitch. She had been working to elevate Henderson's image since Marcus's departure, but something was missing. The garage felt soulless, though she'd never admit it aloud. The design floor was a hive of activity, engineers and artists working in harmony, their energy palpable. Catherine followed her guide through the creative chaos, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. "Your designer will be with you shortly," the associate said, showing her into a sophisticated conference room. "Would you like coffee while you wait?" Before Catherine could respond, a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. "I'll take care of Ms. Henderson from here." The world seemed to tilt slightly as Catherine turned to face Marcus Johnson. He stood confidently in a well-tailored suit, his leather notebook, the same one from Henderson's, tucked professionally under his arm. The greeting died in her throat. "It's been a while," Marcus said pleasantly, extending his hand. "Welcome to Royal Motors." Catherine's mind raced as she automatically shook his hand. This couldn't be right. Marcus was a mechanic, a tinkerer. He couldn't possibly be. "You're the lead designer." The words escaped before she could stop them. Marcus's smile remained professional. "Life has a way of surprising us. Shall we discuss your vehicle?" The next hour was an exercise in surrealism. Marcus presented concept sketches that took Catherine's breath away, explaining each innovation with the confidence of someone who knew their worth. His designs weren't just modifications, they were transformations. "This can't be your work," Catherine finally interrupted, her voice sharp with disbelief. "These designs are, they're revolutionary," Marcus suggested mildly. "Like the ones you dismissed at Henderson's." Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That was different. You were just a mechanic," Marcus finished. He opened his notebook to a familiar page, the original sketch of the Rolls-Royce restoration. "Sometimes the greatest limitation isn't skill or talent, Miss Henderson. It's the boxes other people put us in." Before Catherine could respond, Sir George Canterbury himself appeared in the doorway. "Ah, Miss Henderson. I trust Marcus is taking good care of you." Catherine's eyes widened in recognition. You're the owner of the Rolls-Royce." Among other things, Sir George smiled. "Marcus, the prototype for the new flagship model has arrived. Perhaps Miss Henderson would like to see it." The prototype sat in a private viewing room, its lines both aggressive and elegant, its presence commanding. Catherine recognized elements from Marcus's old sketches, now refined and realized in steel and carbon fiber. "This design," Sir George said proudly, "has already generated more pre-orders than any car in our history. Marcus has a gift for seeing possibilities others miss." Catherine stood silent, her worldview shifting uncomfortably. The man she had dismissed as just a mechanic was now creating automotive history right before her eyes. As she left Royal Motors that afternoon, Catherine caught a glimpse of Marcus in his office, surrounded by admiring designers, pointing out details on a massive digital display. He looked completely at home, completely in his element, exactly where he belonged. Her drive back to Henderson's was filled with uncomfortable reflections and a growing realization that she had monumentally misjudged not just Marcus Johnson, but perhaps many other things as well. The weeks following Catherine's visit to Royal Motors brought dramatic changes to both sides of this automotive tale. At Royal Motors, Marcus's team was working around the clock to perfect their revolutionary designs for the upcoming industry showcase. The pressure was intense, but there was joy in the creative process that made every long hour worthwhile. Marcus's office had become a hub of innovation, its walls covered in sketches and 3D renderings. The leather notebook that Catherine had once mocked now sat in a place of honor on his desk, its pages a testament to the journey from dream to reality. "The aerodynamics on the rear diffuser still aren't quite there," Marcus mused one evening, studying a computer simulation. His team, though exhausted, gathered around eagerly. They had learned that Marcus's attention to detail, combined with his practical experience, often led to breakthrough solutions. "What if we approach it like we did with the classic cars," suggested Jimmy, who had recently been promoted to junior designer. "Sometimes the old ways have wisdom we've forgotten." Marcus smiled proudly at his former apprentice. "Exactly. Pull up the archives of the 1955 Mercedes 300 SLR. There's something in those lines we can learn from." Meanwhile, across town at Henderson's Luxury Auto, Catherine was facing her own revelations. The garage's reputation had begun to slip, despite her aggressive modernization efforts. Clients who had once waited months for custom work were taking their business elsewhere, many of them to Royal Motors. Late one night, Catherine sat in her father's old office, surrounded by photographs of the garage's history. One in particular caught her eye, a younger Marcus Johnson standing proudly beside Thomas Henderson, both men beaming as they showcased a custom restoration that had won regional awards. "I remember that day," Thomas said from the doorway, startling his daughter. Marcus had worked weeks on that design, sleeping in the garage most nights. Catherine turned to her father, seeing the weariness in his face. "Daddy, I saw Marcus at Royal Motors." Thomas nodded slowly. "I heard he's doing well for himself. Sir Canterbury called me last week, actually. Thanked me for giving Marcus his start, though God knows I didn't do enough to keep him here." "Why didn't you tell me?" Catherine asked. "About Sir Canterbury and the Rolls-Royce? Would it have made a difference?" Thomas countered gently. "You were so determined to put everyone in their proper place, you forgot that talent doesn't care about social boundaries." The truth of her father's words stung, but Catherine was prevented from responding by the arrival of an elegant envelope. The invitation to the annual Automotive Excellence Awards was printed on heavy paper, the Royal Motors logo embossed in silver. Back at Royal Motors, Marcus was facing his own moment of truth. Sir George had called him into the private garage where they had first discussed his future, the twin Rolls-Royces still holding court among the classic cars. "The flagship design is nominated in multiple categories," Sir George announced, his eyes twinkling. "But there's something else I want to discuss with you." Marcus watched as the elderly designer withdrew a folder from his desk. "What is this?" "Ownership papers," Sir George replied. "I'm retiring, Marcus. Royal Motors needs new blood, new vision. It needs someone who understands both the art and science of automotive design, someone who never forgets where they came from but isn't afraid to reach for the stars." Marcus stared at the papers in shock. "Sir, I'm just if you say, just a mechanic, I'll have to reconsider my decision," Sir George interrupted with a laugh. "You're a designer, Marcus. An innovator. And soon, you'll be the owner of Royal Motors' custom division." The news spread through the design studio like wildfire. Marcus's team celebrated with champagne and heartfelt speeches, but he found himself drawn to his office, to the quiet space where dreams took shape. He opened his notebook to a blank page and began to sketch. The design that flowed from his pencil was unlike anything he'd created before, a perfect fusion of classical elegance and modern innovation, a car that told the story of its creator's journey. As the industry award ceremony approached, both Marcus and Catherine found themselves preparing for a night that would change everything. Catherine, humbled by her recent revelations, spent hours drafting a letter of apology she wasn't sure she'd have the courage to deliver. Marcus, standing on the brink of an achievement beyond his wildest dreams, returned to Henderson's one quiet evening after hours. The garage was empty, but the memories were everywhere, in the tools still hanging in their familiar places, in the oil stains on the concrete, in the echoes of lessons learned and dreams born. He placed a small package on Thomas Henderson's desk, a detailed scale model of his award-nominated design, with a note that read, "Thank you for giving me my start. Marcus Johnson, Royal Motors Design Division." As he left, Marcus paused in the doorway, remembering Catherine's words about knowing one's place. He smiled, understanding now that one's place wasn't assigned by others, it was earned through passion, determination, and the courage to defy expectations. The stage was set for the award ceremony, where paths would cross again and truths would finally be spoken. But for now, in the quiet of their respective domains, both Marcus and Catherine prepared for a night that would redefine not just their professional lives, but their understanding of what was truly possible when prejudice gave way to potential. The week before the Automotive Excellence Awards, Atlanta's luxury car community was abuzz with speculation. Rumors about Royal Motors' revolutionary new design had leaked, and the automotive press was in a frenzy. What made the story even more compelling was the designer's unconventional background, a former mechanic who had risen to become one of the industry's most innovative creators. Catherine Henderson sat in her office at Henderson's Luxury Auto, scrolling through article after article about Marcus Johnson's meteoric rise. Each story seemed to twist the knife deeper, highlighting not just his talent, but his character, his humility, his dedication, his vision. "Miss Henderson?" Clara appeared at her door. The latest issue of Auto Design Quarterly just arrived. They're featuring Royal Motors on the cover. The magazine's glossy cover showed Marcus standing beside his flagship design, the car's stunning lines partially hidden under a stylish shroud. The headline read, "The Future of Luxury, How One Designer is Redefining Automotive Excellence." Catherine began reading, her coffee growing cold beside her. Marcus Johnson's journey from skilled mechanic to revolutionary designer represents more than just a personal triumph, it's a reminder that innovation knows no social bounds. His designs, which seamlessly blend practical experience with artistic vision, have already attracted attention from collectors and manufacturers worldwide. The article went on to detail Marcus's philosophy of design, his commitment to mentoring young talents like Jimmy, and his upcoming unveiling at the award ceremony. But it was a quote from Sir George Canterbury that made Catherine pause. "Sometimes the greatest barriers to innovation aren't technical, they're social. We limit ourselves when we limit others based on preconceptions." Marcus Johnson isn't just designing cars, he's designing the future of automotive excellence. Across town at Royal Motors, Marcus was dealing with his own media attention. Journalists sought interviews, industry leaders requested meetings, and his inbox overflowed with congratulations from colleagues old and new. "They want to know the secret," Sir George chuckled, watching Marcus dodge another phone call. "They can't understand how a simple mechanic could create something so revolutionary." Marcus smiled, running his hand along the smooth lines of his design. "The secret was there all along, in every engine I repaired, every car I restored. You just had to be willing to see it." The prototype stood gleaming in the private showroom, its lines both familiar and revolutionary. Marcus had named it the Phoenix, a fitting symbol for his own journey from the ashes of his former career to the heights of automotive design. Jimmy burst into the office, waving a tablet. "Mr. Johnson. The early reviews are starting to come in. They're calling the Phoenix a paradigm shift in luxury automotive design." Marcus nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He pulled out his old leather notebook, turning to the original sketches he'd made at Henderson's. The core of the Phoenix's design had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That evening, as the design team celebrated the early buzz, Marcus received an unexpected email from Thomas Henderson. "Dear Marcus, the model you left on my desk is beautiful. Catherine saw it today, she stood looking at it for nearly an hour. I think she's finally beginning to understand what I saw in you all those years ago. Whatever happens at the award ceremony, know that you've already won something more important than any trophy. You've shown that talent and determination can overcome any barrier. Best regards, Thomas Henderson." Meanwhile, Catherine was making her own preparations for the ceremony. Her invitation sat on her desk, a reminder of the role she played in Marcus's journey, though not the role she'd intended. She opened her laptop and began typing. "Dear Marcus, I owe you an apology." The words came slowly at first, then faster as she confronted her own prejudices and mistakes. By the time she finished, the sun had set over Atlanta, casting long shadows through her office windows. As the days counted down to the ceremony, the automotive world held its breath. The Phoenix wasn't just a car, it was becoming a symbol of transformation, of potential realized, of barriers broken. Marcus spent the final days before the ceremony with his team, perfecting every detail of the Phoenix's presentation. Each curve, each innovation, each element of the design told part of his story, from the classic influences he'd learned working on vintage cars to the cutting-edge technology he'd embraced at Royal Motors. "It's more than ready," Sir George assured him, watching Marcus make one final adjustment. "The question is, are you?" Marcus straightened up, looking at his mentor with a smile. "I've been ready since the day I first picked up a wrench." The annual Automotive Excellence Awards transformed Atlanta's Grand Ballroom into a showcase of automotive elegance. Vintage classics shared space with cutting-edge concepts, their chrome and steel gleaming under crystal chandeliers. The industry's elite mingled with designers, engineers, and innovators, all awaiting the night's revelations. Catherine Henderson arrived early, her designer gown drawing admiring glances. But her attention was fixed on the covered display at the center of the hall, the Phoenix, Marcus Johnson's creation, still hidden beneath a silk shroud. "Quite a turnout," Thomas Henderson said, joining his daughter. "Word is the Phoenix has already attracted more pre-orders than any luxury car in history." Catherine nodded, clutching her purse where her unsent apology letter lay folded. "Daddy, did you know? About Marcus's talent, I mean. Did you see this coming?" Thomas smiled gently. "I saw someone who loved cars the way artists love paint and canvas. The rest was up to him." The ceremony began with the usual speeches and acknowledgments. Industry veterans were honored, lifetime achievements celebrated. But everyone knew the night's main event was yet to come. Sir George Canterbury took the stage, his tweed jacket standing out among the tuxedos. "Tonight," he began, "we're not just celebrating automotive excellence. We're celebrating the power of vision, of determination, of seeing beyond the surface to the potential that lies beneath." The lights dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated the shrouded Phoenix. Marcus Johnson stepped onto the stage, no longer the mechanic in work clothes but a designer in his element. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady, "I'd like to share a story about transformation." As the shroud fell away, gasps rippled through the audience. The Phoenix was revealed in all its glory, a masterpiece of design that somehow captured both the soul of classic automotive elegance and the promise of the future. Marcus began explaining the design, but Catherine barely heard the words. She was seeing, really seeing, the echoes of those sketches she had once dismissed, now refined, realized, and revolutionary. "The Phoenix represents more than just a new design," Marcus continued. "It represents the possibility of transformation, the power of believing in potential, not just in machines, but in people." The presentation concluded with thunderous applause. As the audience mingled during intermission, Catherine found herself drawn to the Phoenix, its lines telling a story she was only now beginning to understand. "It's something, isn't it?" Marcus's voice came from behind her. Catherine turned, her prepared apology catching in her throat. But before she could speak, the ceremony resumed. "The award for Best Innovative Design goes to..." The presenter paused for dramatic effect. "Marcus Johnson, for the Phoenix." The applause was deafening. Marcus took the stage again, accepting the award with characteristic grace. "This award," he said, "belongs to everyone who believed in possibility. To Sir George Canterbury, who saw potential where others saw presumption. To my team at Royal Motors, who helped turn dreams into reality." He paused, then continued, "And to Henderson's Luxury Auto, where I first learned that every car has a story to tell." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes as Marcus continued, "But most of all, this award belongs to every person who's ever been told to know their place. Your place is wherever your passion and talent take you." The second award announcement brought even more surprise. For outstanding contribution to automotive innovation and business leadership, the Emerging Businessman of the Year award goes to Marcus Johnson. As Marcus accepted his second award of the night, Catherine finally found her courage. She approached him as he left the stage. "Marcus, I know," he said simply, looking at his former employer's daughter with understanding rather than triumph. "We all have our journeys of transformation." The night continued with celebrations and congratulations, but in a quiet moment, Marcus slipped away to the ballroom's terrace. He pulled out his worn leather notebook, opening it to a blank page. Catherine found him there, sketching under the Atlanta stars. "Still drawing in that old notebook," she said softly. Marcus smiled. "Some things don't need to change. Others do." "I was wrong," Catherine said finally, the words she'd struggled to write now flowing freely. "About you, about everything. I'm sorry." Marcus closed his notebook, turning to face her. "We're all wrong sometimes, Catherine. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge?" Inside, the Phoenix gleamed under the ballroom lights, its very existence a testament to the power of seeing beyond surface judgments to the potential that lies within. And in that moment, both Marcus and Catherine understood that the night's true award wasn't cast in metal, it was forged in the recognition of human possibility. The morning after the award ceremony, Atlanta's automotive world was forever changed. News of the Phoenix's unveiling and Marcus Johnson's historic double win dominated industry headlines. But within this public triumph, a more personal transformation was taking place. Catherine Henderson sat in her father's office at Henderson's Luxury Auto, the morning sun streaming through the windows. The garage felt different now. Every tool, every workbench, every oil stain on the concrete floor seemed to tell a story she'd been too blind to read. "I've been thinking," she said to Thomas, who sat across from her with his morning coffee. "About what Marcus said last night, about transformation." Thomas watched his daughter carefully, seeing something new in her expression, a humility that had been missing before. Sometimes our greatest mistakes lead to our most important lessons. Catherine pulled out a folder filled with sketches, copies of Marcus's original designs that she discovered in the garage's archives. These weren't just modifications, were they? They were innovations. And I was too proud to see it. Pride can be a dangerous thing, Thomas agreed. It can blind us to possibilities, to potential, in cars and in people. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jimmy, who had returned to Henderson's after the ceremony, stood in the doorway. "Miss Henderson? There's someone here to see you." Marcus Johnson stepped into the office, his 2 awards conspicuously absent, carrying only his faithful leather notebook. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. "Your speech last night," Catherine began, rising from her chair. "About transformation." "Wasn't just about cars," Marcus finished, his voice gentle. "Catherine, I came to show you something." He opened his notebook to a fresh sketch, a design that made both Catherine and Thomas lean forward in surprise. It was a reimagining of Henderson's Luxury Auto, combining the garage's historic elements with modern innovation. "The Phoenix taught me something important," Marcus explained. "The best designs don't erase history, they build on it. Henderson's doesn't need to choose between tradition and innovation. It needs to embrace both." Catherine stared at the sketch, seeing her father's legacy and the future's potential intertwined in Marcus's lines. "Why would you help us? After everything?" "Because transformation isn't a solo journey," Marcus said. "Royal Motors and Henderson's were both part of my story. Maybe they still can be." Thomas Henderson cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. "What exactly are you proposing, son?" "A partnership," Marcus replied. "Royal Motors' design innovation combined with Henderson's historical expertise. Sir George has already approved the idea. We could create something unique, a space where mechanics and designers work together, where experience and innovation aren't separated by artificial barriers." Catherine felt tears threatening. "I don't deserve this chance." "It's not about deserving," Marcus said firmly. "It's about growing. About seeing potential where others see limitations." The next few hours were spent in detailed discussion. Plans were drawn, ideas exchanged, and bridges that had once seemed burned beyond repair began to rebuild themselves, stronger than before. As the day drew to a close, Catherine found herself alone with Marcus in the garage, standing beside the spot where the Rolls-Royce had once stood. "I still have the letter," she admitted. "The one I wrote but never gave you last night." Marcus smiled. "Keep it. Some things don't need to be said to be understood." Before leaving, Marcus paused by his old workbench. "You know, the Phoenix wasn't just named for my journey. It was named for every person who's ever had to rise above others' expectations. Including you, Catherine." As he walked away, Catherine remained in the garage, watching the sunset paint the tools and machines in shades of gold. She understood now that redemption wasn't just about apologizing for past mistakes, it was about creating a better future from their lessons. 2 years after the night that changed everything, Henderson's Royal Design Works stood as a testament to the power of transformation. The historic garage had evolved into something entirely new, a unique fusion of traditional craftsmanship and cutting-edge design innovation. The morning sun streamed through the renovated building's glass walls, illuminating a space where mechanics and designers worked side by side. In one corner, Jimmy led a team of young apprentices through the basics of both repair and design, continuing the legacy of mentorship that Marcus had begun. Catherine Henderson, dressed in elegant but practical clothes, moved through the workshop with new purpose. Gone was the woman who had once sneered at a mechanic's dreams. In her place was a leader who understood that true luxury wasn't about status, it was about vision, craft, and respect. The new apprenticeship program is going well, she reported to Marcus, who had arrived for their weekly collaboration meeting. We've got applicants from all backgrounds, all walks of life. Marcus nodded approvingly, his 2 historic awards now displayed alongside photographs of Henderson's history in the building's entrance. That's what this place is all about, seeing potential everywhere. Their partnership had exceeded all expectations. Royal Motors custom designs were now developed and implemented at Henderson's, creating a unique synergy between innovation and execution. The waiting list for their services had grown so long they'd had to open 2 new locations. "Did you see this morning's paper?" Catherine asked, pulling out a newspaper. The headline read, "Henderson's Royal Design Works launches scholarship program for underprivileged youth." "Your idea," Marcus reminded her with a smile. "You've come a long way from the woman who thought mechanics should stay in their place." Catherine's face softened. "We all have our journeys. Some of us just need a little more help seeing the right path." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar face, Sir George Canterbury, still sporting his trademark tweed jacket despite his official retirement. "Ah, the dynamic duo," he chuckled. "I trust everything's ready for today's event." Today marked the unveiling of their latest project, a community program that would provide both automotive training and design education to young people who might otherwise never have such opportunities. The main workshop had been transformed for the occasion. Local media, industry leaders, and community representatives gathered to witness the launch. But the most important guests were the 20 young people who would form the program's first class. Marcus stepped up to the podium, his worn leather notebook in hand. 2 years ago, I stood on a different stage and talked about transformation. Today, we're not just talking about it, we're creating it. He gestured to the diverse group of young faces before him. Each of you has been told, in one way or another, to know your place. Today, we're telling you something different. Your place is wherever your dreams and talent can take you. Catherine joined him at the podium. Henderson's Royal Design Works isn't just a garage, or a design studio, or even a business. It's a promise that talent knows no boundaries, that innovation comes from everywhere, and that the future belongs to those brave enough to imagine it. The ceremony continued with the introduction of each student, their stories as diverse as their backgrounds. There was a young woman who learned mechanics from her grandmother, a boy who sketched cars during his mother's night shifts, a teenager who repaired bicycles for his entire neighborhood. As Marcus watched them receive their workshop jackets, each emblazoned with both the Hendersons and Royal Motors logos, he opened his notebook to its final page. There, beside his latest design sketches, he had written a simple truth: every journey begins with someone believing in possibility. Later that evening, after the crowds had gone and the workshop had quieted, Marcus and Catherine stood in the spot where their story had begun. The space where he had once been dismissed was now a symbol of inclusion and opportunity. "Do you ever wonder," Catherine asked, "what would have happened if I hadn't forced you out that day?" Marcus considered the question. "Everything happens for a reason, Catherine. Sometimes our greatest setbacks lead to our greatest opportunities." Still, she smiled, "I'm glad we found our way back here." As they walked through the workshop one last time before leaving, they passed the wall where Marcus's original sketches now hung alongside photographs of their journey, from the day he left Henderson's to the night of his awards, from the partnership announcement to today's ceremony. In the center was a photograph of that first Rolls-Royce, the car that had started it all. Beneath it was a simple plaque that read, "Never judge a car by its paint, or a person by their position. Look deeper, dream bigger, believe stronger." Outside, the Atlanta sunset painted the sky in shades of promise. A new group of dreamers would arrive tomorrow, each carrying their own hopes, their own potential. And thanks to one mechanic who dared to design, and one woman who learned to see beyond prejudice, they would find a place where those dreams could take flight. The story of Henderson's Royal Design Works became more than just a tale of personal redemption, it became a beacon of possibility, a reminder that transformation isn't just about changing yourself, but about changing the world around you. And somewhere in Atlanta, a worn leather notebook still holds the sketches of dreams yet to come, waiting for the next person brave enough to believe in possibility. This story reminds us that talent knows no social boundaries, and true potential often lies hidden behind our prejudices. Every person deserves the chance to dream big and reach for the stars, regardless of their background or current position. Let's break down the barriers of prejudice together and create a world where ability matters more than appearance, where passion trumps position, and where dreams have no social limitations. Did this story touch your heart? Help us spread this message of hope and transformation by hitting the like button. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that challenge societal norms and celebrate the triumph of human spirit. Together, we can create a world where everyone's potential is recognized and respected.